Okay, hi everyone. Hope you can hear me. Welcome to this, I think, important session. We can talk all day long about policy positions and strategies, but delivery of objectives is entirely dependent on infrastructure. So I'm looking forward to the content of these presentations. We have 4 presentations. I'll introduce them as we go. What we're going to do, how we're going to run it is the 4 presentations will roll, and then if we've got time left at the end, we'll do questions at the end. Excuse me. So thank you to the presenters for coming today. We're really looking forward to the content of what you've got to say. So I'll kick off with welcoming Lachlan Harris. Lachlan is a manager in the Circular Economy Policy Branch at the New South Wales EPA and is experienced in regulatory policy and programs. Prior to his current role, Lachlan was interestingly involved in the rollout of the New South Wales CDS. Today, Lachlan is going to provide some insights into the development of the long-awaited New South Wales Infrastructure Plan. So please welcome Lachlan Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Lachlan Harris. I'm a Manager of Policy in the New South Wales EPA's Circular Economy Policy Branch. As has been mentioned, today I'm going to talk to you about the work we've been doing to develop the New South Wales Waste Infrastructure Plan. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting here, the Gumbaynggirr people. I extend my respects to Gumbaynggirr elders past and present, and extend my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today or joining online. Aboriginal people have cared for country in a sustainable way for more than 65,000 years. Their knowledge and science have much to offer as we work to address the environmental challenges of our time, and we're deeply committed to embedding Aboriginal perspectives in our decision-making at the EPA. So again, as I've mentioned, I'm here to talk about the work we've been doing to develop a waste infrastructure plan. As you've heard today from our CEO, Tony Chappell, we're rapidly running out of landfill capacity in New South Wales. On current projections, Greater Sydney could be out of landfill space by 2030, with some other regions not far behind. But as Tony has alluded to this morning, this presents us with a really great opportunity to harness this issue to accelerate the shift to a circular economy. It's a really complex issue, and the work that we do to support this transition is guided by the way that we make sense of these really complex environmental issues. You might have heard a sailor talk about a whole-of-system thinking approach, which is critical to the work that we do, and it's the way that we can most effectively push the transition to a safe circular economy forward. In simple terms, this means that we make sense of issues by analysing waste and recycling as one point in a broader supply chain, from product design and manufacturing through to disposal and recycling, identifying root causes to problems and understanding the connections between different issues. By taking this approach, we recognise that the issues standing in the way of circularity are complex, and no one solution will provide us with all of the answers. Instead, we need to look across the whole life cycle of products and materials to identify effective opportunities for intervention, from upstream prevention that influences how products are designed or used, to downstream intervention to ensure that they are safely disposed of or recycled. In the context of New South Wales circular economy, this approach has led us to identify several key priority areas and issues, some of which you'll hear from more from my EPA colleagues throughout the 3-day program here. Obviously, a critical part of this life cycle is ensuring infrastructure is in place to maximise our recovery and circularity efforts, but also to ensure that there are safe options for disposal for material that cannot be recovered. As a first phase of our infrastructure plan work, we've developed a better understanding of this critical part of our waste infrastructure system. By understanding the capacity of residual waste management and the barriers to investment in new infrastructure, we're hopeful that we can design solutions to ensure that waste that can't be avoided or recycled is safely disposed of. So I just want to take a minute to outline some of the context and background to this issue. As many of you in this room are aware, in 2021, the previous New South Wales government released the Waste and Sustainable Materials Strategy, which set the strategic direction for New South Wales's transition to a circular economy. Alongside this, the previous government also published a guide to future infrastructure needs, which articulated the infrastructure needed to manage the state's waste out to 2040. This guide was informed by modelling undertaken to understand current and projected waste generation, current and planned capacity, and the infrastructure gaps that need to be filled over the coming 20 years. This information about infrastructure needs was published on the assumption that if gaps were articulated, there would be a response to fill those gaps. And to date, what we're seeing is that this has not occurred, and it's not occurred at a speed that we need to make sure that we're hitting our recovery targets. So in early 2024, we set out to try and understand why this was the case. We'd begun to hear concerns from local councils about difficulty achieving value for money and possible capacity and competition constraints within the waste market. We'd also heard from industry that complex planning processes and uncertain planning outcomes were presenting high investment risks, as was the difficulty in securing land and achieving social licence to operate. We wanted to test and validate these concerns and then develop a plan to address these issues in a comprehensive whole-of-government way. The waste infrastructure plan that we've developed will be more than just a re-articulation of infrastructure needs. As a first step, the EPA, in collaboration with Arcadis, has remodelled New South Wales's putrescible and non-putrescible residual waste infrastructure capacity to identify critical gaps in our ability to meet demand for waste management. In other words, where waste generation exceeds transfer and disposal capacity. In May 2024, the EPA convened a working group of industry and local government representatives, including some of you in attendance today, to test and validate the assumptions behind this modelling to ensure robustness of the result. So this analysis indicates that with no intervention, Greater Sydney will run out of ways to safely dispose of its residual waste from 2030. In 2022-23, Greater Sydney accounted for 54% of New South Wales's total residual waste generation, totalling 4.1 million tonnes. Over the next 20 years, the region's waste generation is expected to keep growing, mostly because of population growth and increased economic activity. This means that beyond 2030, there's a shortfall of approximately 1.1 million tonnes each year in putrescible landfill capacity, the landfills that service our households, which continues to grow in line with waste generation out to 2040 and beyond. This same analysis paints a similar story for non-putrescible landfills that service our construction and demolition activities. Without action, Greater Sydney's demand for these landfills will also exceed supply from roughly 2030, and by 2032 the shortfall will reach approximately 1.9 million tonnes per annum. Infrastructure like landfills and transfer stations is a key area of concern for us because without enough of it in the right place, much of the state's residual waste may have no safe pathway for disposal. Now, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the Greater Sydney focus of much of the work we've done to date. I know that there are a lot of you wondering how regional and remote New South Wales fits into this picture as well. Please be assured that we are also working and looking at how regional waste management is placed, and we've engaged Arcadis to help us better understand this as well. The first part of this work was completed last year, with findings tested and validated with local councils across New South Wales in an extensive effort to understand residual capacity constraints as well as broader waste management challenges for regional New South Wales. Addressing issues arising in the regions will form part of the next phase of our infrastructure plan work. So what are the consequences of doing nothing about this issue? If Sydney's landfills reach capacity, this means that any surplus waste that cannot be disposed using existing or planned facilities will likely need to be sent for processing and disposal in regional or interstate areas. With the need to transport waste longer distances for processing and disposal, the cost to households for landfilling waste could increase by an estimated 20%. The non-putrescible shortfall could result in increased costs for construction and demolition and delays to the delivery of critical infrastructure such as housing. These are large-scale economic effects, and we've been working really hard to understand how we can break down barriers to increasing our residual waste capacity to ensure that this isn't where we end up. In addition to our efforts engaging councils on our modelling work, we've also spoken with ROCs and JOs across the state, as well as 85 individual councils over the past roughly 12 months. These engagements have been wide-ranging, from waste levy-related issues to FOGO, and have also covered infrastructure needs. We've heard councils' views on the difficulties they face in engaging with the market, and that a lack of competition is hampering value for money and access to services. We've heard concerns around the need for more government direction and support, and we're conscious of these pressures and the constraints local councils face when undertaking service delivery. These views has helped us shape the plan, and I'd like to take a moment to thank those in the local government space who've engaged with us through this work. Noting concerns we have heard from parts of industry about investment uncertainty and risk, we've worked hard to better understand these issues as well. We engaged consulting firm Alvarez & Marsal to undertake targeted engagement with waste industry stakeholders, as well as stakeholders from firms providing financial backing to waste infrastructure assets to build an industry point of view on waste infrastructure investment risks. Through this work, over 25 in-depth interviews were conducted with key market participants to better understand how the industry plans for and undertakes its investment. We sought views on broad market challenges, investment considerations, and how government could best support investment decision-making into the future. Feedback through this process was fairly consistent. The main concerns we heard from the waste industry and their financial backers was that a lack of policy certainty regarding the preferred mix of waste management solutions, inconsistent site development processes and experiences, as well as difficulties gaining social licence to operate, were presenting too high of a financial risk and affecting investment appetite. Other concerns included a lack of consistency in the enforcement of regulations and a need for more collaboration between industry and government to ensure support meets industry needs. So we took what we'd heard through these engagements with local government and industry and developed a series of options aiming to address these problems. In January 2025, we held a workshop attended by stakeholders from local government, industry and finance with specific objectives to begin to share the work we had done to date to understand the scale of the capacity issue, validate and refine our understanding of the issues and challenges we'd heard from stakeholders, and for all stakeholders to develop a shared understanding of these issues. We also sought to seek and capture feedback and perspectives from stakeholders on potential options to address these issues and provide a forum for stakeholders to help co-design alternative solutions. We had over 45 participants attend the workshop from industry, local government, private equity firms and other government agencies who provided over 550 pieces of insight and feedback. Key outcomes of the workshop included developing a shared understanding of the scale of the issue, validation and refinement of issues facing the sector, and capturing feedback from stakeholders to build on proposed actions under the plan. A further outcome from this workshop was providing an opportunity to open up further dialogue with industry about future plans and ambitions, including landfill extensions. We've since done a little bit of additional modelling to understand what impact these might have on capacity. If improved, these extensions could address short-term capacity constraints for Greater Sydney, giving us further time to develop strategic planning frameworks for long-term waste infrastructure planning for residual waste management, as well as ongoing circular economy development. And this will be the focus for us moving forward. So the release of the first chapter of the infrastructure plan is very soon, and this will be released for a period of public exhibition. I encourage you all to make a submission and let us know your thoughts when this occurs. As I flagged, the next phase of our work will focus on regional infrastructure needs and how we can better enable a circular economy in New South Wales. As I've touched on, we have begun that process with a regional residual waste needs assessment, but we are also interested in building a better picture of circular economy needs in the regions as well. We anticipate further engagement through the second half of 2025 on this issue, so please stay tuned for that. Our intention is to release the following chapters of the infrastructure plan later in 2025. And finally, I hope that you will all come away from this session with a better understanding of the deep engagement we've been undertaking to help us get this right, and that process will be ongoing. We take this part of our role very seriously, and it's been great to meaningfully engage with so many on this issue. So again, accept my thanks. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're all pretty excited to see what you come up with. Looks like you've covered all bases in the engagement. So what you've got for us, we're all waiting for with bated breath, I can assure you. So thank you, Lachlan. Okay, our second presenter today is Craig Barker, the COO of Resource Recovery for Veolia Australia and New Zealand. Craig's expertise lies in recovery, recycling and diverting waste from landfill, having worked for Suez and now Veolia to drive new resource recovery initiatives in municipal and commercial waste. This has involved delivering a range of infrastructure types, which is important. It's really important for stakeholders to hear from industry participants that are tasked with the challenge of delivering infrastructure. So Craig's infrastructure planning outlook will explain where the resource recovery sector is positioned and how it will change to meet the needs of a future circular economy. So please welcome Craig Barker. Now, Lachlan was able to work the clicker, so I hope it...
See if it goes, see how I go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Yes, it's important that we get a bit of a voice when it comes to these things. We're actually out there delivering infrastructure, and your brief was quite broad, and hopefully I'll be able to cover some of the questions you've asked in three sections. One, global appetite for investing in Australia in waste infrastructure. Two, our advantages and our disadvantages and complexities. And then the way forward, what we need to see. And thankfully, there's a lot of alignment with what I've heard this morning, which is quite encouraging. So how are we placed as an investment destination? So we're still a great place to invest for a myriad of reasons. We've got political and economic stability. We've got complex investment models, PPP, build, own, operate, transfer. We've got high population growth, particularly in the urban areas. Anyone who's been in the rental market recently will know that there's significant stress on our housing market, and we see a lot of people moving to the cities. And we've got well-developed capital markets, just to name a few, but we're still a very attractive investment destination. What we don't like is we've slipped down the rungs a bit. We're behind the US and the EU. We're sitting third as a global capital destination. Based on a survey that was done last year, 57% of all investments since 2021 have been in the energy sector, which is quite interesting. Obviously, renewables are a big part of that investment. 59% of investors prefer water, and the reason I'm talking about energy and water is obviously we play in wastewater and energy. Stable returns, known technology, clearly investors are attracted to that sort of return. And quite interestingly enough, the interest in EFW as an investment globally has slipped from 44% to 21% since 2023. So you can draw your own parallels to that. Obviously, there's an eye on what's happened in the West, and for the reasons already stated with some of the interviews that were done. Encouragingly, 90% of those surveyed still think it's a great place to invest. No surprise that labour cost is an issue, access to skilled labour is an issue, and then we've heard again over and over today, red and green tape is something that scares global investors. So how do we fit in? We've got a global strategy around investment. We've identified 3 areas where we will funnel more capital if given the opportunity: Australia, the Middle East, and the US. Australia is primarily focused on strong environmental regulation. We've got increasing waste management needs. We've got economic stability, and obviously that urbanisation rate, which is bringing a lot of volume to feed infrastructure in the metros. Middle East is more around centralised government spending and the fact that there is obviously a strong need for desalination in the Middle East, so it's somewhere where we can offer a service. And the US is more around ageing infrastructure, so big market, ageing infrastructure. Interesting to see how tariffs and the recent moves affect global capital flows, but we'll watch that with great interest, and I'm sure we'll adapt accordingly. So just some of our advantages and challenges, if I can get this thing to work. It's gone. Here we go. Our advantages. So from a local perspective, our resource recovery opportunities are expanding. We're increasing legislative and regulatory certainty. As much as there is still uncertainty in certain jurisdictions, we are seeing that improve. Our ability to, as a sector, to influence decarbonisation. So we want the conversation to move on from simply scope 1, 2, and 3, and we need to start talking about scope 4. Our ability as a sector to influence outcomes for our customers. I think that's probably the next big thing from our perspective, is to help with that solution. So obviously strong government support for recovery infrastructure, and EFW momentum does continue, albeit with one eye on what's happened in the West. So just a couple of our practical examples of where we're investing and working with local government and state and federal government. ACT MRF reconstruction or construction is underway. The MRF in Spreyton is open. We've constructed that, and that's already taking waste. We're particularly proud of our Earthshore joint venture in Victoria. This is a practical example of where the levy works. So we've got a hazardous waste landfill that's now being repurposed as a resource recovery precinct. We've got a thermal treatment facility for soil. We'll be opening up a soil washing facility later in the year. Again, hazardous waste landfill now starting to do what we're hoping it will do as far as resource recovery and diverting away from landfill. Earth Power, a long-awaited reopening, and thanks to the local team for putting up some very, very big signs, and we're obviously ready to receive the food organics that's being mandated in New South Wales as soon as it's ready. And then working with both federal and state government, improving our fibre processing capabilities in the West, and converting what is effectively 100,000 tonnes of GO processing into 100,000 tonnes of FOGO processing. So co-investing with both Fed and state government to make that happen, which is, again, particularly proud of that. Some of the challenges in the local market, and again, some of this should be, again, consistent with what we've heard. A full EPC wrap is difficult. Getting someone to build a big piece of infrastructure on a fixed price lump sum basis is a particularly challenging piece of work. You can mitigate that by ECI, so obviously getting early contractor involvement and making sure that contractors understand what they're building and the risks associated with that. That's currently where we are with Maryvale, and obviously we're hopeful that that's the next project that does get to financial close. We say there's a lack of experienced EPC delivery teams, particularly in mechanical and electrical locally. They're complex projects. We all know that they're complex projects, so it makes investor appetite a little lower than what we would like. And then there are complex interfaces to manage between O&M, between EPC, between various stakeholders, including, most importantly, the customer. Recycled product, we've heard just how difficult it is to move product. We're obviously tracking this very carefully when it comes to Victoria and New South Wales and what we're proposing for our facilities and what we can actually do with product at the back end. We've spoken about complex regulation and approvals, and the costs are intensive to develop aligned infrastructure. So if there's infrastructure required for product to go to disposal points, that can be very expensive. If you're focusing on the costs, labour market pressure we've spoken about, a reliance on imports for key components is an issue for us. Good to hear just how expensive, or that quantifying how expensive insurance is for us as an industry. It is a significant issue. The last major piece of infrastructure that was lost was the Bedminster up in Cairns, and we're certainly dealing with the fallout of that as a result of more lithium in the waste stream. Availability of structural components locally is an issue for us, and all of this just leads to increased capital spend and operational costs, which calls into question some of the viability of the infrastructure we want to build. We need to have a look at what's happened in the West. I think it's an important look back for us. Certainly a challenging market for EFW. As one of the pioneers, sort of a decade before Kwinana got environmental approval, getting in front of local government, telling them that this technology was safe, it works. It's been challenging to see, the sort of challenging build and what's happened in the West over the last, 6 or 7 years. I think fundamentally the look back tells us that we shouldn't take 6 or 7 years to build one of these things, and there should be some consideration around spare capacity, because some of the landfill operators in Perth were quite bullish about utilising all of their void in the expectation that ERF would come online, and were left a little short at the back end. So I think the look back's important, and well, hopefully we see those facilities operating well soon. So the way forward, again, should be no surprises with this slide. Certainty of supply and demand for output. Again, we've heard that over and over this morning. It's critical for us as investors to see that in play. We want to see social buy-in, and we need to see existing infrastructure supporting what is critical infrastructure going forward. The infrastructure needs to be required. We heard about the Gold Coast example, that landfill space is running out, and there is a strong push to get ERF as the replacement to landfill on the Gold Coast. Consistent policy. Again, I think I'm not the first person to talk about consistent policy. We've had MBTs over the last number of years impacted by emerging contaminants, which certainly has dented investor confidence. So that consistent policy is critical for us to invest. And then, last but not least, balancing the customer's sort of desire and need to see innovation with technology that's proven at scale. So that's a fine balance. There's a fine balance to that. Yes, we want to innovate, but we want to make sure that whatever we do at scale is going to work. What do we need to see from the regulator and government? Again, I think most of this has been covered, right? I'll make my pitch around waste levy and waste levy certainty over an extended period. One of the few times Cleanaway and ourselves agree on things, so we'll take that one on board. Product stewardship, managed to get that in, and obviously effective and mandated is what we'd like to see. Clear and transparent approval processes. We're working hard on Woodlawn and Woodlawn ERF at the moment, and it is a challenging approval process. Last but not least, about referencing back into ERF. Our plan, in our view of the world, is there's a 5-point plan to make these things a success. Safety first. Make sure that you partner with someone who has deep experience in ERF, who has detailed employer requirements when it comes to what these facilities should do based on learned experiences over many, many years and running a number of these facilities internationally. Delivery partners, there are a number of very, very good and credible delivery partners across Australia and internationally, so pick wisely. Invest wisely, make sure that we're investing for 15, 20, 25 years as opposed to short-term investments. Get get it up and running, commission, then look to sell. Obviously, waste supply is critical. We all know that. And then, that balanced view to stakeholder engagement. That's the 5-point plan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Craig. Very interesting. Very interesting that you take such a global view when you're thinking about Australia. We often think of it, become very insular in the way we think here. So capital is king, I guess, and so if it's more attractive to put your capital somewhere else, that's what you're going to do. So that's an interesting aspect to what we need to be thinking about in terms of infrastructure. Excuse me, Peter Laslett is our next presenter. Peter is Director, Sector Strengthening with Recycling Victoria, and will provide us with some insights into how Recycling Victoria has been responding to infrastructure needs. Peter has a background and experience in policy and strategy in the Victorian Government, as well as other key roles across a number of sectors that really sort of enable Peter to take a broad view of waste infrastructure needs. So please welcome Peter Laslett discussing Victoria's infrastructure planning.
Thank you very much, everyone. So yes, our plan is out. So it was published last October. So this presentation is going to be more about the considerations and the process by which we went through to put the plan together. There are quite a few slides because it's a broad-ranging plan, so I'll try and whiz through them as quickly as possible, and there may be time at the end for questions. If not, I'm around for the rest of the day, so very happy to talk to people offline. But, right, here we go. All right, before just jumping into this, just a little bit about Recycling Victoria. As we heard earlier this morning, there's more than one agency involved in Victoria. So I'm from Recycling Victoria. So our purpose is that leadership, stewardship and oversight of our waste and recycling resource recovery services. So we are sometimes termed a regulator. We don't do the kind of same regulation of individual businesses as the EPA. We're looking more at that systems perspective about how we make sure that we've got the capability and capacity that we need in the recycling sector in Victoria. We are located in DECA, our main department, but we don't have the policy lead either. That is with our policy colleagues in DECA, and we still have Sustainability Victoria, who are looking more at that market development space. But in terms of what Recycling Victoria does, so there we go. Those are the functions of Recycling Victoria. You can see infrastructure planning there, which is what the VRIP sits under. The other part that I look after is the strategic procurement. Now, that's not procurement from our perspective, that's supporting local government in procuring waste and recycling services, hence my title of Sector Strengthening. Also important that the VRIP isn't like the one document to rule them all, as it were. We have an annual market intelligence circular economy market report. We have our annual risk and contingency plans. There's plenty of work going on in things like service standards, and also we have our existing policy document, also slightly confusingly called Recycling Victoria, a new economy. So again, not trying to do perhaps everything that is in the the New South Wales infrastructure plan. This is very much what infrastructure do we need, not the policy wrapping around it. But in terms of how we approached this, so it's not the first infrastructure plan that's ever been done in Victoria. For those of you who like acronyms, SWIRP is a great one, so I won't even try and read it out because I always get it wrong. But we had the SWIRP, and we had 6 or 7 regional implementation plans, probably nigh on 2,000 pages of infrastructure plans out there, last updated in 2019. But the VRIP is replacing all of those and has done so in a different way, because as you can see, verbatim from the second reading speech, the key takeaway is we're moving away from a plan which tried to put a very specific location for each of the facilities that we would need over the next 30 years to a more strategic approach, which is kind of looking more at the volumes and the capabilities we need and potential locations for investment, not trying to put those dots in the maps, which was a great undertaking, but I think is possibly a bit being too prescriptive and isn't really government's role in order to be that precise in various locations. So it's a more strategic approach. It's there to inform planning over the next 30 years. It's there to inform market investment, but also government decision-making. And importantly, as we get to it at the end as well, we have to do a new one of these every 3 years. So it's not set and forget. It is definitely the start of an infrastructure planning process. There we go. Perhaps not quite the depth and breadth of consultation we just heard from our New South Wales colleagues, but we did put out a consultation document to the sector to get their feedback on what we're proposing for the VIRP. It was a high-level consultation document, not the full VIRP, and what came back very strongly is that desire for detail, for analysis, for guidance on locations, for information about existing opportunities, for regional information as well. And of course, as we've heard this morning, and we'll continue to hear, I'm sure, throughout the conference, because it's completely correct, the importance of product stewardship and engagement with the sector. As I said before, the VIRP is not a policy document per se, but we're very keen that we make sure that we kind of locate it in that policy work and are cognizant of that impact of policy development, and also how, as you'll see when we come to the actions, how we fit in with the broader scope of work that is being undertaken in Victoria. Cool. So you can see we start with the system overview and policy context, plenty of maps there, putting it in terms of the strategic concepts of the policy development. But then going to the infrastructure needs assessment itself, which is the heart of the VIRP. So we have a lot of analysis in there. So we look at waste projections. It's not just the waste being kind of produced, but also where it ends up. So is it being recycled domestically or offshore? So that's kind of like the demand. Then we look at our capacity. So it's that demand versus capacity. I say it's projected demand based on our current trends. We're not going to say what happens if in the VIRP. It is based on current trends, but we do look at what the opportunities are. But importantly, we also have this capability assessment, because we realise that just saying what capacity we need isn't necessarily enough, is what type of capacity. And it's this alignment of aligning up the waste coming down the pipe with the infrastructure capability and capacity with the end markets. And then we look at that place-based assessment as well. And that ends up in a 2x2 overall assessment and some investment directions as well to guide the market. So what that looks like, I just picked organics. You can see all the waste projection date breakdowns, the source sector, etc. The capacity analysis, again, read the VIRP, you can see how those projections in terms of the reprocessing and also the overall stack up against our infrastructure capacity. We've got that capability assessment coming out some of the key issues, and then that place-based assessment. So like organics is probably one that is more suitable for regional circularity, whereas some of them are going to be necessarily fairly centralised markets. And we've done that across all of the waste streams, broken down by 3-year increments. So again, not expecting you to read this one, but then having that, and then the near, medium-term, long-term and ongoing investment directions across all of the material streams, including then as well material recovery facilities and hazardous waste and residual waste. Landfill capacity, not quite in the same position as New South Wales, but not exactly sitting comfortably. That curve is showing without waste to energy coming in and based on current trends. Again, not assuming that we hit our targets, but this is current trends. So the plan came out before the cap was announced, so we were more saying like these are the potential sizes of the impact. We'll obviously do more modelling now that the cap is out there, but also with those existing policy objectives. They would get that demand curve under our total capacity for the 30-year time period. So we have not, because we are legally obliged in the VIRP to have all the locations that we need for 30 years of capacity. So we didn't add any locations. You can imagine that could be a huge undertaking, but it really does signal that really important need for that strategic planning of residual waste and destinations, both landfill, energy for waste, and night diversion. Then when it comes to the regional opportunities, we have a look at what infrastructure is in the regions. We put the waste projections out there for each region. And then we're terming it in opportunities, because again, we're not saying this must go there, but informed by that place-based analysis and previous plans and also advice to government, we're then looking at saying, well, what are the opportunities that may be in this region for new infrastructure? What are the potential locations? And giving that as signals to the market. We have heard, again, that land use planning is a really key consideration. So what we, again, are obliged to identify is locations that are suitable for development. That is not saying this is where each piece of kit must go. So what we've done is we've taken a very clear approach of working within the existing land use planning framework. That is, after all, what it is there to do, is to guide where things go. So rather than coming over the top, we're working within that. So we're saying, well, what is that alignment with the existing strategies? Where can we co-locate existing things for operational efficiencies and also sharing things like buffers? Zoning and planning, looking at that buffer issues, transport considerations, and also kind of site size as well. That's almost a bit of an algorithm that you can kind of put things through as to where the locations might look. But that's all about new infrastructure. We're also very clear that protecting existing sites is so important because our future needs are based on what we've currently got. We understand that encroachment is a challenge, so there we're putting out very clear messages in the VRIP that all infrastructure is important, that we do need to make sure that we maintain that infrastructure. So we kind of mention things like the appropriate zoning, links to buffer guidance, that agent of change principle, which is something that's already there with quarries, but we've kind of made clear that we support that, and also some of the tools that you can use to protect the existing infrastructure, alongside all of the analysis that's in the document as well, making out that clear strategic case. So what does that mean in practice? As in Victoria, most of the state government planning, a lot of the state government land use planning, I should say, focuses on Melbourne. It's a bit more kind of, regionally focused in the regions. So we have started with Melbourne, but you can see there, that is the Melbourne Industrial and Commercial Land Use Plan, identifying those state significant industrial areas. And then when you put an overlay on top of where the infrastructure is located in Melbourne, it's no surprise that there's a strong correlation between the two. So we're starting that process of working within those land use plans, and also one of the actions that we'll get to is to put out some further guidance, probably later this year or early next year, looking at kind of taking up where we left off in the VRIP to help with that land use planning. It's definitely not a one-done strategy. So we've got these government focus areas. So it's definitely systematising it. Like I said, it's every 3 years we need to update and refresh the full VRIP. We obviously can't, there's a lot out there, so we want to focus on the problematic and emerging waste streams. Residual and hazardous waste is such an important part of this waste system that perhaps, the title is the Victorian Recycling Infrastructure Plan, but really kind of making clear how important that residual waste management and disposal is. Data and collection, because it's a very whistle-stop tour, this one, but some of the challenges in extrapolating from imperfect data and kind of making sure that we've got the best presentation of data to the market without always having the highest quality data coming in that we'd like. And that importance of land use planning. And then finally, continuing to work collaboratively with the sector, both on infrastructure planning, but more broadly in terms of waste and recycling policy. A key theme of the plan is supporting and informing investment. So we did put together an investment prospectus as a companion piece. It's not as long as the VRIP, which ended up being quite a chunky document, hopefully a little bit more friendly for those looking more of an investment angle. Definitely meant to be a modular approach, because we understand that it's a broad church and certain people are looking at certain sectors. So you can see we look at that kind of like global, why invest in the sector in Victoria, what are the investment opportunities in terms of some of the sectors. What we're trying to do is not do the kind of planning version of wish cycling, of just saying this is everything that we want, but maybe some of these are the things that are more the near-term opportunities, whereas in other ones it's really going to be the R&D and the long-term investment and development of capability that we're looking. The market development pathways, there's a number of agencies in Victoria that support market development, and trying to break out from just the circular economy box, but just more broadly. And then some of that regional perspective again, because it is, not everything can go in every region, but trying to minimise the truck movements, the transport, regional circularity is a good aim to have. Then finally, as I say, we are looking to be moving more to infrastructure planning as a service. We will do an update to the VRIP in 3 years' time, but it's not like we want to go into our shell and not say anything, do anything with the sector until then. So after we published, we went out and did some investment-focused roadshows. We did an event in each of our regions. We were at the Waste Expo in Melbourne in October. We're setting up a infrastructure working group, so that's actually gone out on LinkedIn. The expression of interest process has just begun, so and it's on our website too as well. We have to do an annual progress report for VRIP. We're looking at doing land use planning guidance, and of course we will be doing a new VRIP in 2027, which means we'll be consulting in 2026. So it really is one of those ongoing iterative processes. And whilst I understand we're doing questions at the end, I wanted to land on that slide because that QR code will take you through to the Victorian Recycling Infrastructure Plan webpage. So if anybody wants to actually kind of go there, look at the whole plan, please do visit our website. It's all on there. And indeed, as I said, I'm around for the rest of today, but if anyone else has any questions, please contact Recycling Victoria on that that email address, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. That was very interesting. Thank you. Tanya. Is Tanya here? Hi. Okay, our last presentation now has to bring all of that together, really. At least in the municipal space. So, yes, at least in the municipal space. So, Tanya Rajaratnam is a principal environmental consultant with Arcadis and often gets right in the middle of having to consider policy and regulatory settings whilst advising local councils in the delivery of projects, which is then reliant on industry. So Tanya has delivered projects for many local governments around Australia and is, as well as state agencies, federal government and private sector clients. So, responding to infrastructure needs and the role of local government. That's the title of Tanya's presentation, which will, I think, round the session out nicely. So please welcome Tanya.
Now, I will apologise in advance. It was supposed to be my colleague Richard Collins speaking today, but Richard has run off into the Tasmanian wilderness and left me to take over his duties. So please bear with me, thank you, and apologise in advance. So my name is Tanya Rajaratnam. I would like to just start by, I know Lachlan did do an acknowledgement of country, but I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on right now, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So I guess I was asked to speak about the role of local government in helping to facilitate the delivery of waste infrastructure in general. So obviously it's a critical role, and I guess I am partly, there's a big focus, I suppose, on local government in metropolitan areas, but it's not necessarily the case. You know, obviously regional councils are more often involved in running their own waste infrastructure, but sometimes, you know, there is a move away and there is a need for developing new infrastructure to consolidate, you know, small landfills into larger, better performing landfills. And so this can be applicable across different types of infrastructure, from landfill through to recovery and energy recovery infrastructure. Now, before I go on, I suppose I'm interested to know how many local government people do we have here, either in the local government sector? Oh, okay, so and how many in sort of other government agencies? A few, okay. And private sector, we got any private sector people? Yeah, okay, all right, okay. Good mix, good mix. So I guess I just wanted to start with some context. I'm not going to go through through it all. Obviously, Joe Pickin this morning went through the latest national waste data, so you can blame him. But just to put it in context, that local government does control a lot of the supply of waste that's generated nationally, and at least a fifth of the waste, total waste generation is municipal waste, and obviously there is also some councils involved in managing C&I and C&D waste streams as well, but certainly municipal waste is supplied by local governments. So that's what we're talking about. So I guess wanted to start with why. I think back when I first started in this industry, particularly in Sydney, we still had the state government companies supplying a lot of the waste infrastructure. And I think that that situation has obviously changed over time, and local governments, particularly in metropolitan areas or more urbanised areas, I suppose, have moved away from actually developing their own infrastructure. So more and more there is a need for having a strong rationale for being involved in that development process, rather than just leaving it to the private sector. So I think the crucial rationale really is the urgency of running out of landfill space. I think it's generally unlikely that councils will be developing new infrastructure, and particularly recovery infrastructure, when they have 50 years plus of landfill life left. That's just not a good enough driver. And there are exceptions to that, and I would say possibly Lake Macquarie Council, for example, which has quite a long landfill life remaining, but are still very strong proponents of energy from waste infrastructure. So there are exceptions, but I think that urgency of running out of landfill space is a big driver. I guess the market and the operation of the market is the other big driver, and I guess that's, I think, where local government really needs to ensure that's if there's a reason to get into facilitating development of waste infrastructure, then it's where there is a need to address that dysfunction in the market. So where there's not enough competition or just not enough choice in suppliers. I think there's also a big argument for councils being involved when they control the supply of land in many cases, so they have access to land, and they may have access to land that can be acquired easily. So I think the cost of land particularly in urban areas is a big factor. But I guess it's often comes down to having that appetite either within the community or within the council to find solutions. But but I guess just recognising that councils do really control a large supply of both the waste but also often the land. But I guess there are some very significant barriers to local government being involved in developing waste infrastructure, and so I wanted to start with these because they are significant. So I think one of the really big ones is the level of risk appetite in the councils, and many councils are quite risk averse, and that really does inhibit the ability to be involved in facilitating infrastructure development. I think the other big issue is that waste infrastructure is not core business for councils. And I think, that particularly in New South Wales, that is a major issue in, that the actual collection of waste is an essential service, but the provision of somewhere for that waste to go is not. And that becomes a crucial issue that, you know, that councils have struggled to overcome. I think that, you know, another issue that isn't recognised enough, I suppose, is the need for specialist skills in not only the development, I guess the ability to deliver infrastructure, but also, you know, in operations, because a lot of times councils will have a need to operate themselves because it's more cost efficient. But there's, you know, there is a need for more capacity building in local government, particularly in regional locations where it really is difficult to bring in, you know, and to retain staff with the right skills. I guess, you know, some of the other, you know, crucial issues are obviously the need for scale, and, you know, it has been mentioned many times already today, the issues of, you know, policy and regulatory uncertainty, and obviously, you know, market fluctuations and market uncertainty. Those things can't be, you know, overstated. They are a big issue to overcome. There are inherent challenges in collaborating, you know, so on big infrastructure projects where multiple councils need to collaborate together. Obviously, that is challenging to you know, work together with other organisations. I think that, you know, the approvals process is also something that is a big inhibitor for a lot of councils, and that you know, they need urgent solutions, and the approvals process is really getting in the way of finding those solutions. The availability of sites is obviously, you know, particularly in the metropolitan context, is an issue. And I think something that really isn't focused on enough is, you know, that issue of social licence. I know that it has been mentioned already earlier, but that, you know, we just don't have the right level of support from the community for the right solutions, and I think that's something that we could all work together on. So let's move on to the more positive things that councils can do. I think, you know, we need to recognise that those barriers are significant, and a lot of them are things that councils don't have any control over, or don't have very limited control over. But I guess there are, you know, many things that can be done to counteract, I suppose. I think one of the most important things is having decisive local and regional strategies and targets. And I will say that that's not just about, you know, recovery rates and diversion. I think it's been talked about already, you know, today, that driving the market for recycled products is also a responsibility of local governments. And I think that, you know, if we're really going to drive circular solutions, then, you know, local governments need to be making those commitments both to the recovery and to, you know, buying back and increasing the demand for recycled products. And so, you know, having that, I guess, you know, having that foundation with long-term commitment is crucial to being able to get a council across the line in, you know, facilitating development of infrastructure. I think service harmonisation is something that council's grown at, but it is something that can help to at least improve efficiencies in the process. And certainly, if councils, you know, when different parties are working together, if there is an ability to harmonise the services and collection systems that are available, you know, certainly that helps to make a more attractive investment opportunity, and it certainly is a good way of proving the ability of you know, getting agreement on those sorts of things in the beginning is a good way of proving that those parties can work together for solutions. So I think that's something, you know, worth considering before going down that path. I think, you know, developing robust strategic business cases is crucial, and I will talk about that in a minute. I think that, you know, industry, consulting with industry is also a really crucial factor, and I think, you know, it's a responsibility of the private sector and councils to be talking and to be sharing information, because that is crucial to understanding where the market's at, understanding the technologies available, the interest in the market, and importantly, what level of risk allocation, and risk sharing is going to be required in order to get something across the line. And having that knowledge, up front, having early engagement is crucial in understanding that process. I think that, I know there's another session on local government procurement, but I guess it's, important that tenders are agnostic to technology, sometimes even agnostic to location of facilities, so that, I guess it allows flexibility in the industry to respond to, appetite for risk and different contract conditions. And I guess the other one that I think is, addressing the issue of social licence is, it's crucial for local governments to be engaging effectively with their communities from an early stage. So, building that local support for the solutions, building trust in the local government as a decision maker on their behalf, I think is really important in building social licence over the long term for the right solutions and fit for purpose solutions. So I guess I just wanted to, look, this is very detailed. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but just going along with strategic business cases, I think are a crucial tool that that councils really should be using in any kind of decision-making process around future, waste solutions. And I guess just, this is adapted from the New South Wales Government Business Case Guidelines, which, really breaks it down into 4 key aspects, and that is, establishing the case for change is a really crucial thing up front, and making sure that, the problem is articulated, that there is a clear need for intervention, that you understand stakeholder needs, and that it's, in alignment with government priorities. And really setting the base case against which, you'll assess the options. Cost-benefit analysis, obviously, is important to look at the greater benefits to society and looking at, a lot of those non-monetary impacts and benefits, and comparing, those between options. Obviously, affordability is a crucial component, and so, financial analysis, understanding whole of life costs, and also, I think, really importantly, understanding what are the uncertainties. What don't we know? What don't we, and what are the sensitivities? What happens if our assumptions are not correct? How much impact will that have on the outcome? And also understanding, crucial timelines and, the possibility of staging things over time. And I think the other, crucial element is understanding the deliverability. So, it's, do we have the skills and resources available? Do we understand the market capacity and capability? And have we looked at, the potential commercial models that could be suitable? Do we have a way of actually evaluating whether this is the right solution, and, whether it's the performance is there? And I think something that's also really crucially needs to be taken into consideration at this early stage too is, the resilience of the potential options to shocks and stresses. So things like natural disasters, collapse in the market. So unexpected things that could happen along the way. Look, there are many different, I could go into huge detail, but this is just one example, I suppose, of a decision pathway that councils could use. It's not the only way that decisions can be made, but It is, I suppose, really important to start with having a case for change, having that, that sound basis of a strategic business case. Up front, I think, really crucially is there a location available that really, is one thing that should direct, where the council is going next. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a council-owned site. There may be another site that could be acquired. There may be opportunity for partnering with a site owner, but I guess that's a big decision at the front. And then it's a decision about how involved does the council want to be. And so I guess it could be anything from no involvement in operations, so potentially leasing a site, for example, right through to actually being involved in the design and construction and operation. I guess then it's also a decision about scale and whether you need to partner. Do you have enough scale on your own, or do you need to build scale by joining with another party? And so that's where, I guess obviously you need to decide which parties are going to be involved. And so then if it's a joint party, if it's a joint collaboration, then there's a decision to be made around, what type of entity structure is most suitable to this particular proposal. So, from joint venture to special purpose vehicle to, lead council alliance, MOU, and I guess, there's varying degrees of risk in those different models, but also, complexity, sort of weighing up risk and complexity. So I think, at that point you can decide whether or not to proceed, but I think it's important to remember that if the decision, if that doesn't come to fruition and if there isn't agreement between all the parties, then, it's not necessarily the end of the line, and that's where you can go back and revise the business case. So just a very quick example, I guess, of a project which I wasn't personally involved in, but my colleagues in Melbourne had some involvement in this particular example of councils working together and developing so establishing a special purpose vehicle, a separate entity in order for a specific purpose, and the purpose of that entity is to produce an advanced waste processing option for the councils, and so I guess it has ended up with at the end of last year, middle of last year, a waste supply agreement with the Maryvale Energy from Waste facility, which hopefully will all come to fruition. So there's 9 councils involved from the southeast Melbourne region. I guess the main thing to keep in mind here is the length of time that it can take for a group of councils. So it actually started back in 2019. There were 16 councils from the Metropolitan Melbourne Resource Recovery Group involved, and things evolved over time to now 9 councils joining that waste, that special purpose vehicle and that waste supply agreement. So over an almost 6-year period, quite a lot of things changed along the way, including at one stage it was there was a potential site available, and evolved into being just a sort of third-party services contract with between the special purpose vehicle and the facility. So a long process, and things can change along the way, but ultimately the key drivers being lack of landfill, not many other options, and but also community opposition to landfill, I think, was a big factor in being able to push through that particular project. So I guess almost at the end, joint procurement, I guess some of the the features of good joint procurements can be considered. So, you know, having a good track record of working together, having a clear business case established for the particular model, you know, just having a fit-for-purpose agreement, whether it's formalised or non-formalised, whether it's just an MOU or an actual, you know, separate entity that's developed. These things need to be considered on a case-by-case basis. I think risk sharing is a really crucial one, and having, you know, an equitable way of parties sharing risks, and but having equal voting rights is important. You know, internal governance and internal communications, I think, can't be emphasised enough. And of course, you know, ultimately having very generous lead times is essential. So I think that's pretty much it. But I did want to finish on a positive note, I suppose, and a bit of a nod to the conference theme, which is, you know, I think, what is the conference theme? Something about, you know, acting, being local, acting global. I think, anyway, I think it's always important to look to our international peers, and I'm not suggesting that there's really anywhere, apart from perhaps some of our big Queensland councils, there's maybe not really anywhere very comparable to Amsterdam in Australia, but it's always good to have, to set our aspirations high and to look to, you know, sort of positive examples of what can be achieved. And I think Amsterdam is one of those where they have actually set a target of becoming 100% circular by 2050, and achieving and halving the use of virgin materials by 2030. And they are well on the way to achieving those targets too. And the Port of Amsterdam is a central pillar of that, I suppose, in a way. And it's owned by the municipal government, and it is, you know, a circular economy hub essentially, with energy from waste facility that powers industry there, and you know, a sort of organics biorefinery cluster. There's a plastic hub, which is, you know, involved in the whole life cycle of remanufacturing plastics. You know, lots of C&D and other recovery industries, and also lots of research and development, and I guess sort of startup incubators for circular, particularly for circular industries. So I think it's just a lovely little example of where there's a lot of public-private collaboration, and a lot of investment from the local municipal government into, you know, sort of achieving ambitious goals. So thank you. That's it. Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. A lot in that presentation for people to think about. I'm just going to ask the panel members to come up, and we've got a bit of time for questions. So if you could just come back up. I'm going to kick off the questions. There should be a mic running around. I've got a few before you, Mike. You're first, though. Craig, you mentioned ageing infrastructure in the US. We've certainly got that here in Australia. And then the need for filling what gaps are emerging with new infrastructure. In Victoria, Peter, you noted that all infrastructure is important. So where there are these gaps, if there's not investment, no capital flowing to solve those gaps, what happens? And what's the role of the regulators here? I'll start with you, Craig.
I think it's already been mentioned. We're going to see waste move long distances, right? That'll be the outcome. One of the worked examples was the imminent closure of our Hallam Road landfill in Victoria. Obviously, we've got a proposal up for a transfer station that's received some vociferous feedback. But if that doesn't get up, then potentially we're going to see a lot of waste moved long distances. So from a regulator perspective, I think in my presentation I spoke about a balanced view to social license. We've got to make sure that everyone has a voice, but where it is critical infrastructure, where we've got planning schemes that allow for that activity, we've got to back those activities in.
Any response from you, Lachlan, on the regulator's role?
Yeah, no. Can you hear me from this mic?
Yep.
Agree with Craig. I think that I sort of spoke a little bit about it in my presentation, but if we don't get the infrastructure mix right, we will see long distance transport increase costs for councils and ratepayers, and so I guess there is an acknowledgement that within that, government needs to play a role in social licence, and we're hopeful that with our plan, and hopefully you'll see it soon, you'll start to see that government's stepping into that space and trying to have that conversation broadly with the community. So certainly a very important part of the focus for us.
There's a big risk if the capital doesn't flow, then we're in a world of pain in terms of solutions. And the next question I really have is a sort of a targeted question. You talked about, Peter, in your presentation about land use planning and capacity analysis. One of the things that we see over and over and over again when we're trying to facilitate solutions for local councils is the distances that need to be covered. And Victoria has much smaller distances. So moving materials to destinations, how important are transfer stations in everybody's view of the world? I'll start with you, Peter.
Yes, they are definitely important. I think it's fair to say it's one of those areas where I think we can look in more depth into the important role of transfer stations as we develop our planning further in the next Europe, particularly as things like landfills do reach capacity and waste needs to be aggregated and then transported. I think the distances being transported, I think it does vary by waste type, because as I said in my presentation, we were keen not to be trying to push opportunities uphill, and that there are economies of scale. I think you mentioned earlier about that market functioning and market failure, and so where is there a market failure that needs intervention? Where is there a market that functions and we need to allow that market to function? Because the regional circularity is definitely an objective that we should be looking at, where it's economically viable, where it's not economically viable. I think we have one bottle-to-bottle glass recycler in Victoria. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I don't think trying to push for regional bottle circularity for glass is necessarily going to be the way forward, but we can get better regional outcomes in some areas, around FOGO. That's not something that you want to be transporting large distances. We do roll out the glass collection. Are we looking at increasing overall recovery rates? And of course, there are some elements of transport that are priced in: the cost of fuel, the cost of the time. There's other externalities that aren't. So I think it's perhaps a little bit of a kind of around the houses answer, but I think you need to look at those individual markets and make sure that where there is an opportunity to encourage regional and local circularity, you should do so. Where there needs to be economies of scale, you need to look at what the most efficient and effective way of managing, of achieving those economies of scale are, which includes aggregation and ongoing transport. So I think that aggregation is going to be important. That obviously is going to be coming from transfer stations. So I think they are going to be an important part going forward.
Yeah. Okay.
Just piggybacking off Peter there for New South Wales as well. It's something we're thinking about is what are some of the other I guess things that are happening in the regions that present opportunities for us to piggyback off. I know that there's a lot of interest around the development of the REZs, the renewable energy zones, and there's opportunity there for, I guess, doing waste management and circular economy better. So something potentially for us to look at in the future is looking at where are opportunities for us to, I guess, piggyback off existing activity.
Yeah. An essential piggyback. Essential. Thanks. Okay, I think there'll be a mic microphone for you, Mike. If you've got a question, just raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. And if you could just let us know who you are and where you're from. Mike Ritchie from MRA.
Thank you, Catherine. Lachlan, to you. Very good to see you talking about the Waste Infrastructure Plan, and the consultation you've done is extensive. That consultation, as you'll be aware, is very much you telling us and then us feeding back on the floor. The infrastructure plan has not been released. Victoria's on its third iteration of infrastructure planning and prospectus. We still have no guidance about what infrastructure is needed. In 2021, you put out a plan saying there was a landfill crisis in Sydney, inert running out by 28, Pute running out by 36. I noticed the slide up there just before that said, a few of us questioned that infrastructure cliff, the landfill cliff in Sydney being real. You've just put up a slide that says, actually, when you take into account Viola and Lucas Heights approvals, there's no infrastructure cliff at all. There's no landfill problem in Sydney at all, which some of us kind of knew from the outset. It's that flopping and changing of New South Wales policy that just sends the market into chaos. So what I'm pleading with you to tell the Minister to release the plan, then it can go through the sieve of common sense tests and people can comment on it without this being this smoke and mirrors around the plan that's now being released in chapters over the next 6 months. I mean, it was due to be released last October and we're still waiting for it. How do companies invest with this degree of uncertainty? I know it's not your job, but Tony, if you're in the room, Minister, tomorrow,
Thanks,
release
Mike.
the plan.
Well, the Minister is coming tomorrow, Mike, so maybe you can
Thank you.
Repeat your question tomorrow to the Minister. But
Thank you. Mike,
you
it's coming
respond.
soon. It's coming soon.
Like turn up tomorrow morning.
I'm doing a little bit of a public servant dance there, Mike, but it's coming soon. Yeah.
One of the interesting parts of your presentation, Lachlan, was the hint of landfill expansions. Can you elaborate on that for the room?
Elaborate on the...
On the possible capacity expansions. We're thinking Lucas Heights here.
Mm-hmm. So obviously many of you would know that there is a proposal to expand the Lucas Heights facility. I think, I guess in our conversations with industry, council, government as well, it sort of presents a path of least resistance for addressing shorter term capacity constraints. And so, I mean, that's an acknowledgement that it's very difficult to get up a new landfill, particularly in the Greater Sydney area. And so what are the ways that we can look at existing infrastructure and optimising its use, but also new infrastructure? So obviously we've had a conversation broadly about energy from waste. The government has opened up that conversation with the public with the release of the Energy from Waste options paper. I think that's a sort of sensible, measured start to that conversation, and we'll see where that lands. But I think it's an acknowledgement that it will be difficult to get a new landfill up for Greater Sydney.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve Vitero at Hornsby Council. It's a question for Lachlan. Picking up on Catherine and Mike's comments, we've in recent years started to call it a waste crisis, Sydney Metropolitan. Prior to that, it wasn't really recognised as that. The state New South Wales government has recognised housing as a crisis and has taken some really direct steps and actually made changes. First part of the question is, do you see that waste is seen in a similar vein and addressed at cabinet level, or is it just within the Environment Department? And secondly, do you see that there's a risk with airspace opening up, that the crisis is put down the road a little bit, so therefore we're not going to deal with it now, given the lead times that new facilities are required?
Yeah, good question.
No, thank you. So first part of the question, yes, 100%. We are focused on ensuring that this is a cabinet priority, a whole of government priority, and not just a priority for the EPA as a regulator or the Environment Department. We've worked really hard to, I guess, bring all of the different parts of government together, and some of those conversations and processes have been really difficult. And there's been, I guess, friction, for want of a better word. But I think once the plan is released, you will start to see that there is that whole of government approach and there is accountability built into the plan about delivery. Second part of the question was, sorry,
If we change licensing and create more airspace, does that kick the problem down the road to therefore it's not a crisis? We'll worry about that tomorrow.
No, that's certainly not how we're approaching it. I think the plan sort of builds, I guess, a policy framework for really being able to address infrastructure needs urgently and rapidly, and certainly not looking to kick things down the road by sort of expanding existing facilities. That's the, yeah.
Another question from the floor. Thanks, Gail.
Thanks, Catherine. So we are getting one in New South Wales, but it's only one chapter. We're on our second incarnation in Victoria, SWRP, now VREP. Our challenge is, when is a plan not a plan? And Craig's talked about this from, just go on your Hallam Road, we've got to have infrastructure certainty, we invest in accord with certainty, however, the plan then gets ignored potentially by other agencies. So, you know, we need more than a plan. We need, I guess, an enforceable document that can be held to, because we still have investment risk, and we're seeing that, right? So, you know, when you've got a document that goes out and it looks like it's a great idea at the time, but then other agencies, planning or EPA, ignore it, that's a huge sovereign risk for us as an industry. So, Craig, how do we avoid that? How are we going to make sure that doesn't happen again in future in Victoria? And, you know, Lachlan, what's the plan, Stan? Like, how are we going to stop this going on? Because Veolia's spent a fortune and we've now got significant infrastructure at risk.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I'll go first. As far as how do we avoid it going forward, Gail, that's a good question. I think we've got to work within the instruments that are in front of us, right? We know that the Hampton Park precinct was identified as, you know, strategic for waste management. We know that we've got a local community that is reasonably incensed and is keen to make life difficult, even for a transfer station, which again is, you know, we've designed everything we possibly can to make sure that there's minimal impact on amenity for that transfer station. So I think all we can do is continue to work within the planning instruments that are there and make sure that any design and any proposal we put forward is world's best practice. That's all we can do as an investor.
And from my perspective, Gail, as I said, we've worked really hard to bring different parts of government together and create that accountability. I'm hopeful that when you see the plan that you'll see that in there. And yeah, we've tried really hard to bring everyone together, and it's been a really difficult process. So hopefully you will see that in the plan when it comes. Yeah.
And I just want to say from the Victorian perspective as well, we understand that the importance of continuity, whilst also giving the latest information to potential investors in the sector. So it's not like the next VREP is going to go suddenly take a very, very direction. It is important that we have that consistency of direction that we iterate to build on and improve. And similarly, yes, it's taken a slightly different strategic approach to this work, but it didn't kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater. A lot of the good work that was done for this work was fed into the VREP, and I don't think there's anything in the VREP that is inconsistent with this work, and like the key sites continue to be important sites that they are identified in the VREP, and yeah, that consistency of message is important. But yes, it's also working with colleagues and across government, and I mean in Victoria, you know, the EPA may not approve a site if it is inconsistent with the VREP, but we are looking to kind of be more of a positive spin on that, and kind of looking to you know, that they do provide us with referrals, but also engaging with the sector to help give those messages and advice beforehand, so that rather than it being a negative you will kind of not approve if inconsistent, but a positive as in we are helping people bring forward proposals that are consistent with the VREP and therefore have a higher chance of getting through and, being able to so very clearly identify to our strategic planning colleagues, what the needs are and what the infrastructure challenges are. I'm not in the planning department. It's a pretty tough gig. There's a lot of competing land use pressures. I don't think there's a magic silver bullet, but we are very much committed to working collaboratively across government to try and address some of those very real challenges that you've brought up.
All right, thank you. We'll have last question here, and then, sorry, we've already got one down the back. We'll make that the last one for this session, thanks.
Yeah, it's Dave Reeser, manager at Mid Coast Council, waste manager. Mine's around planning. So obviously the infrastructure plan's about to get here, and you spoke that you've worked with other departments. Is there talk about having a fast-track approval process for critical waste infrastructure, especially when it's consistent with state strategies? And are there going to be set time for responses? Because often what we see around EPA reporting, EPL reporting, all that sort of stuff, it's you must have this by X date or we're going to slap you on the wrist. Are we going to do something the other way, where we go, here's the process you need to follow, and the government departments are going to respond within X time, so there's a proper fast-track approval process that people can be comfortable in?
Do your best. Lachlan.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'll have to do a dance a little bit, I think. So all of those, points and questions and issues that you raised, we've heard from councils around the state. So it is feeding into the way we've developed the plan. I'm sorry I can't give you the detail of what it says in the plan about those things, but please rest assured that we have heard those concerns from councils.
Okay, thank you. Afternoon tea is waiting for you outside. Would you just please thank our great presentations today?